The following program is for informational and educational purposes only and is not to be considered legal advice. Fraudsters Radio was created to expose the many scams and frauds that have so infected society today. Scammers, fraudsters, and rip-off artists abound, whether it's scamming homeowners with bogus foreclosure relief services, dating fraud, incompetent lawyers, or consumer rip-offs. It's high time the public has a voice. If you work in a profession that deals with fraud, or if you believe you were or are a victim of fraud, you now have a radio listening public that wants to hear from you. Please feel free to message us through our Fraudsters Radio Facebook page, and we may have you on the show as a guest. If you'd like to call in for today's show, the number is 646-668-8512.
And welcome to Fraudsters Radio. I'm Lori Z, nationally syndicated radio host and consumer advocate, along with my co-host, litigation consultant Storm Bradford, owner of Mortgage Fraud Examiners. Storm, how are your holidays going?
Mine are doing great. How are yours?
Mine were doing good, too. Did you get everything you wanted?
No. I did not. I never did what I wanted.
I'll have to call your wife and talk to her.
Yeah, somebody needs to talk to her. 4 years in a row, she got me shoe condoms.
She got you what?
The shoe condoms.
Now,
those rubber things that you put over those rubber things that you put over your shoes so when you go out in the rain it doesn't ruin your shoes?
Okay, that's what she got you?
4 years in a row I got them. This year I didn't get them.
Okay. Well, are your shoes real expensive that they have to be protected?
Not necessarily, no. Matter of fact, one time, years ago, I bought a pair of alligator shoes. I'm talking about probably 40 years ago I bought them. They were $1,000 then.
Okay.
And I had them, because they were so expensive. It's when I was out every day in the business world, and so I wanted to dress nice and so forth. So didn't wear them all the time, just wore them, when I had big meetings and stuff like that. Anyway, over time, I got a hole in the sole of the shoe, and the heel was worn down. And
right.
So I was going to take them to get them fixed. And I'm looking in my closet. I can't find them. So I said to my wife, I said, do you know where my alligator shoes are? Which one were your alligator shoes? And she goes, now there was a pair of shoes that had a hole in the sole and the heels were kind of rough. I threw them out.
Oh, no.
I was looking up in the state I was in. Yeah, I was looking in the state I was in for how much, whether you got the electric chair or you got life in prison for murder. And I said, how could you do that? She goes, well, these shoes I probably had for 15 years, and they looked as good as they did the day I bought them, except for the hole in the sole and the heel, and she threw them out. Yeah, I could have.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But anyway, outside of that, Santa Claus is pretty good to me, I guess.
Well, that's good. I mean, I know you have a dog like I do, and my shoe story before we get started, probably about 20 years ago, I had this beautiful pair, the most expensive pair of Italian leather boots I ever owned, and they were sitting in my closet, and so I had a Great Dane puppy at the time who got out of his box. He was in a big, huge box when I wasn't home, and anyway, he quickly grew and got out of the box and ate one of the shoes, chewed up one of the shoes. I just cried my eyes out, but I couldn't be mad at him because it was my fault. Why? Because I didn't close the closet door. So that taught me a lesson when you have dogs.
Well, with puppies, and like I told you, we had just gotten a new pup. And anyway, we were talking to this one trainer because we wanted to get him trained so he wouldn't, he'd do what he's supposed to do when he's supposed to do it. And
right.
he was house trained in 3 days. The problem is we weren't trained in 3 days because he was going to the door when it was time to go to the bathroom, but if we didn't know he'd gone to the door, he'd wait at the door and say, well, I guess nobody's coming. I'll just find some other place to go to the bathroom too. So the only time, and somebody told us, one of these trainers that we were interviewing said, look, you know, from here on out, if the dog goes to the bathroom, it's not his fault in the house, it's your fault. And she's right.
Yep. Well,
a couple
of like me,
a couple accidents he's had is because he was at the door and we didn't go to the door. Yeah.
Yep. See, mine has me trained, 142-pound Great Dane. He's at the door all the time to go out in the backyard, which is fenced in, because not because he wants to go do his business, just because he wants to go outside. So all day I'm up and down and up and down and up and down just to let him out. So he's out, and then when he comes in, whether he's done his business or not, he walks right over to where the treat container is, sticks his nose there, and waits for me to give him a treat. So I think he has me trained, Storm.
Well, let me tell you how I solved that problem.
Okay, tell me.
As the front door is to go to the bathroom, as the back door is to go to the bathroom, as the front door is to go play.
I see.
So if he needs to go to the bathroom, he's at the back door. And that's what we're missing because, there's different areas of the house. You're in the kitchen, you're here, you're there, and you're not paying attention to the back door. So I just told my wife, I said, anytime he disappears from your presence, go check the back door because that's probably where he is.
You can get a little jingle bell like on a string, and he can jingle it. He can learn to jingle it, and then you'll hear it.
Well, you know what I did? I did that. Matter of fact, somebody told me about that, and maybe it was you that told me. And anyway,
probably.
What I did is I went to one of these pet stores, and they had like a set of bells that you could hang on the door, and they were like $14-15. And
right.
So anyway, I told my wife, I said, let's go check. I said, they have all these sales after Christmas, and I guarantee you there's some jingle bells somewhere. So we went to Home Depot, 75% off of all Christmas stuff, and lo and behold, here was this set of bells that you could put on your doorknob that were $2.50. So I made out like a bandit. So I'm pretty happy with the way the holidays are going. Plus, you got to look at it this way, too. I always do this at midnight. I say, okay, made it through another year.
Yeah.
Because who knows what's in store in 2019.
Exactly. And we're going to have a guest on at 1:15 to cover. Well, we'll talk about that when we introduce him. But I wanted to share a quick fraud story because this just happened to a friend of mine in her 70s. She got hacked. It was a very interesting email because the email she told me about appeared to come from Amazon. And so it basically said, there has been an order placed in your name. If you did not place this order, click on the attachment. And so, a lot of elderly people, they don't think to look at the email address from which it's coming. Although a lot of these hackers are very, they're very creative because they can make it almost look like it's coming from Amazon. So people don't know what to look for. Well, regardless, she ended up she didn't place an order on Amazon, so she clicked on the attachment. And so what unfortunately that did was it let a hacker into her computer, where it turns out they were able to gain access to her emails. Now, fortunately, she uses the same remote service I do, where she was able to quickly call them and say, hey, I think I did something wrong, but it was a pricey mistake. Because to fix something, they have to dump everybody else because your information can be taken and then used in different ways. And so one of the things I want to point out is that it's pretty creative to say if you didn't place this order, but a lot of times they usually just come out and they make it like you did place an order. And because so many people use Amazon, they just assume that they've ordered something. Or now they're coming out with things like, you received a gift card from whatever company, at Costco, for example. And then interestingly, a few days ago, I got a phone call that was obviously from a call center, and I said to the guy, take me off your list, I'm on the do not call. And he goes, well, wait a minute. He goes, you filled out a little form from Kia, from the Kia dealer to win something. Now, I do happen to have a Kia, but I will tell you, I never fill out any of those little forms they have to put in a fishbowl. I don't like people having access to my information. And I said, I'm sorry I didn't do that. And he goes, well, you did last Easter. And I went, goodbye, click, hang up, because they're becoming sneakier with the way they're twisting things and doing things. And so if you're not really sharp or attuned to that, I think it's getting worse. And I don't know if you get calls like that, but it's getting a lot worse.
Well, let me tell you, it's funny that you say that, because half an hour ago, before we came on the show, I was going I use Yahoo Mail, and I was going through my mail, and I have something that says that you need to respond back. We're just checking to make sure that you didn't deactivate your Yahoo Mail account.
Yep.
And I did what you just suggested. I looked at where it was coming from. Right. And, here's this, email address that, it's not Yahoo. It's some place, probably over in Russia or Nigeria or someplace. But, I knew enough, because you and I have done this show, that we know enough about that. But I could guarantee you that 99% of the public would have looked at that and said, oh, my God, let me click this thing open, and bang, now somebody's in their computer.
Exactly. And I think I read somewhere that more than 50% of phone calls are going to be robocalls, and or solicitation calls, even if you're on the do not call list. But unfortunately, I haven't had any luck in getting anyone from the FCC or the FTC to be on the show. And what disturbs me about the phone calls, we've talked before, is a lot of times they use the first 6 digits of your number, so they make you think it's a local call, and it's not. Now, I blacklist everything after they call. I've tried some other programs, but not so much good luck. So it's getting to the point where I can't answer my own phone unless I know, unless you're programmed into my phone now, I don't want to answer it. If I pick it up, I'm very tentative on it, because I'm expecting it now to be a robocall or solicitation, and it usually is. And so I think, I don't know what the government or any of these government agencies can do about it, but part of the problem is they allow the sales of whatever type of equipment spoofs those phone numbers. And so I don't understand how they can actually get away with it. And I don't know if you know much about that, but that's something that disturbs me, is that our government is allowing people to purchase this equipment that does that. And you can't really track down, because it's a spoof number. If you actually call that number, it's usually a real person's number, and they have no idea of what's happening. But I do Google a lot of the phone numbers.
Yeah, that happened to me recently, and I've probably in the last 2 or 3 months had 100 or so phone calls from somebody, some bunch in, I guess it's New York, because they're always New York phone numbers, about Bitcoin. And I've told these people every time, don't call again. And then I would block that number. Right. And so then, like the next day, I get a phone call from the same group, and I'd block that number. And I'd say, look, I told you people to stop calling me. And then again, I get a phone call from New York, and I'd block that number. And then finally, I said, wait a minute, I'm just going to call these people back. And I call these people back. And I jump on this guy, and he's like, I got no idea what you're talking about. Yeah, and I said, I just got a call from you about this. And the guy says, I have no idea. And he goes, thanks for calling. He said, I'm going to check into this. And he called me back, and he said, because I blocked that number. So I said, I blocked your number, so email me back. So he emails me back, and he said that, I forgot how they told him, but that's what they're doing. They're finding other people's phone numbers, and that's what they're using.
Yes. Yeah, and now, see, I know that if you receive a threatening call, I believe you can dial star 57, and it goes to the police department right after you receive a call. However, they only want you to use that if if your life is being threatened type of situation. Right. I think that they should have another star service the phone company should make a star service available so that every time you get a robocall, you can do a star whatever number, and it reports that number back to the phone company, and they can say, hey, it's a spam call. Because after I get the calls that I don't pick up, I usually just Google it to see, and then, there are a lot of websites that'll tell you, hey, this is a safe call or an unsafe call, and I'm going to tell you 99% show up as unsafe calls. But it makes it, when you have your own business like you and I do, you pretty much have to answer the phone, but it makes you, I don't know, like I said, more tentative about answering the phone because you're expecting those robocalls, which are just so annoying, and I think it's disturbing. So somebody's got to do something.
Well, Laurie, before we go to break, why don't you explain to me, because that's the first I've heard of this, and to our listeners, what's the deal with this Star 57?
Well, Star 57 is a star service the phone companies offer where if somebody has called you and they're threatening you, harassing you, like your life is in danger, when you hang up that call, if you dial Star 57, it reports back to your local police department, and then they're able to trace the actual number that it came from. That's what a star service is. So, for example, if you're on Verizon, you could Google Verizon Star Services, and it will come up with a list of different things. Storm, just like when I call in here for the radio show, I dial Star 70 before the phone number, and what that does is it blocks any incoming calls until we get off. That way I don't get incoming calls on the phone while we're speaking.
Oh, that's cool. Is that Verizon? Is that Verizon?
Yes. Yep. But most companies have something like that.
Yeah, I have Verizon. That's interesting. No, I didn't know about that Star 57 because, obviously if somebody's threatening you or harassing you and keeps calling, that's a good idea to be able to have that service. I didn't know about that. Nice to know.
Yeah, I'll send you a list, but let's do this. Let's go to a commercial break now. Hopefully our guest is on the line, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Have you received a notice of foreclosure on your property? Do you suspect that you're involved in an unfair or fraudulent loan agreement? Are you looking for a way to save your home? Would you like to cut through all the misinformation and find out what really works? Would you like to learn strategies that the so-called gurus aren't aware of? If you answered yes to any of those questions, a professional team at Mortgage Fraud Examiners can assist you and your attorney with all of these things and more. Contract breaches, errors, statutory regulatory violations, fraudulent appraisals, and other fraudulent conduct cause most mortgages to be legally problematic. In fact, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation found that nearly 2,000 financial institutions they assessed received citations for significant compliance violations. They also examined appraisals and found out that of the 259 appraisals reviewed for accuracy, only 7 fully complied with professional standards. Call us at 844-920-7200. That's 844-920-7200. Mortgage Fraud Examiners, 844-920-7200.
Okay, we're back on AM/FM 24/7 radio. The call-in number, if you'd like to call and ask a question of our guest or of the host, is 646-668-8512, and I'd like to welcome on our special guest, John Edmonds. John, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself before we start interrogating you, if you will?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Basically, I'm a retired psychiatric social worker. I live in Rainbow Valley, Arizona, which is out in the middle of nowhere, about 40 miles south of Phoenix, southwest of Phoenix, actually. I live on a big ranch, and I have a number of different businesses that I deal with as a person who protects and rescues endangered horses that have been abandoned, and I retrain the horses and then get them ready to go to programs where they can actually assist our veterans or help kids that are inappropriate for traditional counseling environments and women that are survivors of domestic violence. On top of that, I write, I do radio shows, I do TV, just lots of different interests, and that's about it.
Well, you're on today for a very specific purpose. Can you give us a little bit of background on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I actually am working with a company that's called DEAF, DEAF. It's the Defense Enabling and Assisting Framework. It's state-of-the-art digital communications security technology. And what it does is it guards any transmission that you have between your phone that's hooked up with DEAF and any other phone that you're speaking to. And what happens is that it cannot be hacked. It's quantum technology, quantum computing technology, and it's the absolute state-of-the-art. And it's been used by everybody from government to just about anybody that you can think of that's in a position where they're trying to protect their privacy. And it's pretty much foolproof. And it's now available to the public at a very reasonable price.
Now, you're saying phone. Does that include laptops? Does that include computers, iPads, and things like that?
Yeah, we're getting real close to that right now in terms of the testing, but we don't want to release that right now and say that that's guaranteed. What's guaranteed right now is the fact that it's for cell phones, and very quickly here it'll be for home phones, and it'll be for anything that is hooked up directly to a phone number.
And why
might
would
even
I
include it. Well, fraud is probably about the number one issue that all of us are facing in our lives in terms of protecting our privacy. I mean, everything from if you go all the way back to the Patriot Act and then all of the changes that happened in terms of personal privacy as a result of that, it's just kind of gone downhill from there. Now we have to worry about having our bank accounts hacked. We have to, anything that basically we try to do electronically, we've got to worry about fraud. And with DEAF, you're not going to have those issues. I use it constantly. I've used it for almost a year now. Every phone call I make is protected by DEAF, and it works fabulously. I used to get regular problems with people interrupting signal for radio shows that I did or just about anything, and now you don't have it. I never have any problems with it at all.
How do people get into your phone? I mean, I know if I call the phone company, like if I'm on Verizon, or I can go onto their little app and do that, but do you know how do they access? I mean, I'm just curious. How do they access your phone? Because prior to you coming on the show, Storm and I were talking a little bit about, the robocalls and how they spoof the phone numbers and nobody does anything about it. Do you know a little bit about that?
I would tell you this. I'm not an expert about any of this. I know that what happens with cell phones is that they clone the phone numbers. And then once they have a clone of the phone number, you're kind of hammered. I mean, it's like they can actually go on, like the overpasses and, around freeways and stuff, and they have scanners that they can actually sit there and read phone numbers. And then what they do is they clone the number and they just start using it like it's you, and then you get the bill for it. It actually happened to my wife a few years ago.
Yeah, many years ago I worked for Bell Atlantic NYNEX Mobile, which is now Verizon, and I remember 25 years ago we would take classes in exactly what you said, how people would have these scanning devices, which I don't know whether they're legal or not. I would think they should be illegal, where they could capture the phone number. And usually what happens, though, is when a phone number is cloned, each phone has its own identification number. It's like its own serial number, basically. And so if they were able to successfully clone that number, you can't have two phone numbers with two different serial numbers or identification numbers. And so a lot of times that would actually stop the person who really had the phone from being able to even use their service.
Right. Well,
so,
I'm not a security person in terms of being an expert. Technically, I'm not an engineer for anything to do with the phones. I just happen to know the people that own this company and put it together, and I know they're patriots, and I know that they did this specifically, to go ahead and protect people that are in high places. It was used during the president's campaign, for 2016. And I know that, President Trump has it, and that, it's worked great for him, and it's worked great for everybody that I've ever come across that's had the product. I have never heard a complaint.
Well, let me ask you, John, how exactly, not the technological way how it works, but is it something that I go to your company and and my calls go through you to the other person? I mean, how does that work? I'm not understanding how that works.
Okay. What it works is this. You sign up. If you go to www.deaf protection.com and use the code Stardust for $10 a month, you will have this product. And what happens is that your phone is actually, what they do is they list your phone as part of the system, and it's like an invisible cloak that kind of like lays over your phone and everything you do with it, and that way it can't be hacked.
Yeah.
So how
I'm reading
my phone? Why, excuse me, Laurie.
Go ahead.
Why am I worried about my phone being hacked? And when you say hacked, what is it specifically happening to my phone that would be of a detriment to me?
Well, what would happen is that, let's say, I use the word hack because most people understand hack as being something that where your information is being monitored by an outside source that you wouldn't want it to be. And it's the same thing. Let's say you're trying to, do online banking with your phone. Well, guess what? Nobody can hack it. It's not going to be able to be intercepted.
I got you. So that it's not so much the phone calls itself. It's that if I'm using my phone as a computer, it's not it's not giving out my banking information or that kind of stuff because it's being protected by your product.
Correct. It also means that nobody else can listen in who's unintended.
Yeah, I know years ago.
Why do we care about that?
Well, I mean, to me, my privacy is, something that's guaranteed to me under the Constitution, and I don't want my rights to be violated.
So, are you talking about the government listening in, or are you just talking about just anybody in particular listening in?
Anybody at all, including government.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. You're talking about it's an encrypted type of system. And again, I've worked for a lot of jobs. Years ago, I worked for a company that sold countermeasure and surveillance type devices. And back then, if you wanted to speak on an encrypted line, each party had to have special equipment to hook up to their phone, whether it was even one was a landline phone before cell phones really came out. So you had to purchase actual physical equipment and both parties had to have it or it wouldn't be encrypted. But Storm, think about all the people that you have in your phone. I mean, in my phone, we've done a lot of shows. I've done shows with celebrities. I wouldn't want someone to access my phone just to be able to access my contacts. And then again, like John was saying, if you have applications that do banking, for example, like most banks now, you have a little thing, you click on it, you can make a deposit, take a picture. If they hack into your phone, they would be able to access all that information, just like on a regular desktop. But when you think about wireless, there's tons of wireless things. So hopefully, maybe this technology will develop more, because I read some studies on it here, and it's talking about things like keyless car remotes, things that can be compromised, home alarm systems, pagers, who uses those, traffic alert systems, toll collection transponders, TV satellites, airliner communications, medical pagers, and space probes can all be disrupted. So keeping your phone locked down to private, could you imagine if somebody got into your personal phone, what information they could access? It's the same reason why I tell people when you have social media like Facebook, you should keep your account locked down. But most people don't do that. And the other part with that, of course, is even if it is locked down, they can copy the information. So imagine if they got the contacts out of your phone, that might not be such a good thing. But let's do this. It's a half hour in, so let's go to a commercial break, and we'll come back and we'll ask John some more questions. Stay with us.
There is a very high likelihood your mortgage contains an extensive error. At Mortgage Fraud Examiners, we know just how costly a missed opportunity can be. For almost 40 years, we have consulted, retained, and referred to by attorneys, lawyers, trial practitioners throughout the nation. Put another way, we are the trusted source for litigation support. A foreclosure is basically an allegation the homeowner breached the contract by failing to make timely payments. The contract is clear. The borrower promised they would make timely payments, and if they didn't, the lender could take the property. The only way to overcome the homeowner's breach is to show the lender breached first, identify errors that would void the contract, identify regulatory violations, identify appraisal fraud and other fraudulent contact, and the only way to find these wrongs is to thoroughly examine the whole mortgage transaction. This meticulous examination of your mortgage transaction and appraisal can identify legal defects that would make your mortgage unenforceable and entitle you to compensation or even free title to your property. Call us at 844-920-7200. Mortgage Fraud Examiners, that's 844-920-7200. 844-920-7200.
Okay, we're back on AM/FM 24/7 radio. Our call-in number is 646-668-8512. We have our special guest today, John Edmonds, and John's been explaining a little bit about his company that he's with, and that's Deaf. Is that Deaf Protection? Is that the name of it, John?
Yeah, it's just called Deaf, but our website is deafprotection.com. And then if you want to go ahead and it'll give you a choice of who referred you. My designation is Stardust after the name of my ranch, Stardust Ranch. So you have to use that. But the cool thing about Deaf is that if I call somebody, they're protected as well as me, okay? At that moment while I'm making that phone call, both parties are protected. And there's no hardware involved or anything else. You don't have to have something that you plug into or you have to go through. You just make your phone calls like you always do. And quite frankly, unless there's an interruption, you're never even going to know the service is there. It's just always on. It's always protecting you. And, what's really nice is that if you have children and, you send pictures and things like that of your children are going to be protected because of the fact nobody gets those pictures. People forget that there's a lot of information in a photograph that's electronically encrypted right into the photograph. And, that information is just widely available to anybody who wants it. With Deaf, that information is not transmitted.
And I see that
Flynn,
on your...
General Flynn should have had this on his phone.
Yeah, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like I said, this was one of those really top shelf types of technology that, only the elite really had access to until recently. And now it's available to anybody who wants it, and it's available worldwide. So, anybody anywhere can sign up for this. Pardon me?
Yeah, is there a back door, John, for the government that if they like what they do with some other services that you have to turn it over?
When I have asked about that, and again, I didn't design the technology, but I'm told no. This is something that is completely proprietary, and literally it's between you and the company, and that's it.
Yeah, we had discussed a while back, Storm and I had discussed Alexa. So if you, mine's waking up. If you ask Alexa what is, she can send it back. She actually acknowledges she can send back information, to the company that produces her, which I think is Amazon, and probably Google does the same kind of thing. So everybody's always listening to you everywhere. And I'm looking at the information on your site. So it says that it protects cell phone and smartphone calls, VoIP calls, IP phones, and then Skype calls over your protected telephone or IP. So you're saying, though, you only one person has to have it. The party that you're calling does not. But that means you're protected. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're protected, correct? on
No,
their
it
phone
means
from
that
someone hacking them.
while your phone is connected to their phone in transmission, you're both protected.
Interesting.
Yeah, this is amazing stuff. You know,
well, I know that when John Brennan went before Congress and lied and said that they weren't listening into everyone's phone calls, the NSA's not privy to this at all.
No.
Okay.
Well, that would be
No,
good. Now,
this
if only the company
one
could
of the
stop robocalls.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't see how that's going to happen. You know, it's not about the choices of who calls you. It's
Right.
purely about protecting the connection. And see, the thing that's really interesting is that the phone numbers and the billing information are completely disconnected. So there's no way for anybody to be able to, get the information from billing and then connect it to the phone number and then go ahead and be able to figure out who's who. So you have complete.
And you guys aren't recording them, so it doesn't.
No, not at all. We have absolutely no idea who's talking to who or what they're saying. We're not involved in that at all.
Or care. Yeah.
Storm, can you talk a little bit about the Privacy Act? Because I heard John mention that before, and I'm pretty sure that would play into this, correct?
Yeah. John, are you familiar with the Privacy Act?
I am somewhat familiar with it. I'm a psychiatric social worker, so I'm not a person who is an expert about all this. I got involved because of the fact that I am a patriot, and I love the idea that we have something available to protect our privacy. I'm sure I'll learn a lot more about it as I go along. But right now, I'm an average person who's trying to become, protected and as well informed as possible.
Yeah, I tell you, I've got a wife, 5 kids, a dog, and a bird. I could use a psychiatric social worker. Well, all I can say is this, and that is that it's a different world that we all grew up in, and there's a lot of threats that are out there, and we all have to do what we can to protect ourselves, protect our country, and do what's good. Yeah.
I want to go back, Storm.
Go ahead.
Talk a little bit, because I pulled up a little bit of information, but you're really kind of the expert here. Explain because people may not know what the Privacy Act of 1974 is. So can you explain a little bit?
Well, basically, it's government agencies keep records, like the IRS, for an example. They have records, all your tax records. It's a crime for that information to be disseminated. It doesn't necessarily come under the Privacy Act of 1974, because the Privacy Act of 74 is for all agencies that collect data, collect information, that they just can't throw it out to the public and let people have that information. That's why you heard about FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. In order to get something that an agency has, you have to put in what's known as a FOIA request to actually see that type of information. But, these different agencies collect data all the time, and the Privacy Act basically prohibits the disclosure of this information from the system of records that they have, without the consent of the individual or whoever's asking for it.
Okay, so is that why when you get a FOIA request, a lot of times the documents are redacted so that you can't see the confidential information?
Yeah, and there's exemptions to the act as well. So, because of which was already mentioned, there's an exemption for the Department of Homeland Security. There's different agencies that I know the passenger name record on flights, railroad, buses, and things like that. That's something that doesn't protect certain individuals from that. But, in order to get this information, that's why you hear about FOIA. You have to actually write in and say, look, I would like to have information on so-and-so and so-and-so. Years ago, I did work for Judicial Watch, and I've done some work for that guy left that started Judicial Watch, and he started another group and I helped a little bit of work for them. And a lot of the information that they get to make public is they get it through the FOIA Act. Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch, who now runs it, to get all the information on Hillary Clinton and her emails and that kind of stuff, he was doing multiple FOIA requests and filing lawsuits to get information that the State Department wasn't giving them. But yeah, that's basically what it is. It's just an act to because the government keeps records, that they're not freely disseminated unless you ask for them.
Got it. Yeah, and I'm looking at the DEF website here where it talks about things that could happen, like cyber attacks. Like, we're thinking small, you and I, Storm. People may have such confidential information. I'm assuming in the government, they may have their own government apps. You know what I'm saying? That with confidential information. So we're thinking small because, let's just see here. It says public officials have expressed well-founded concerns regarding potential cyber attacks on critical infrastructures such as power, water, communications, and transportation. In December 2015, a cyber attack perpetrated against Ukrainian power plants effectively shut down electricity to over 80,000 customers. So people who do have smartphones, it really is a computer just in your phone. And if someone had access to that information, then it would be easy for them to make trouble. And so I looked up some information on something called What Is My IP Address about hackers. And it tells you there are three types of hackers. Young kids having fun, and I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie. It came out years ago called War Games, where two kids, or one of the kids was able to hack into and get ready to have our system send out bombs, and he thought it was just a game. But you have a lot of young kids doing that, and then you have recreational hackers who think in their mind they have a reason or a grudge against somebody or against a company. And then you've got the professional hackers, which are the ones that, like we talked about earlier, they want you to click on the attachments. I'm assuming on a phone that when you click on an attachment, I know that malware can get into phones because I have Norton on my phone to protect it. And I don't know that most people have any type of malware program on their phones itself. But from what I read, it sounds like the DEF actually just cuts them off, and they have no way of knowing any backdoor way to get into it. Do I kind of have that right, John?
Yes. If the call does not emanate from your IP, then it's not going to be allowed to be able to go through.
Gotcha.
Okay. And the cool thing about it is that the way it does this is that, like in my case, I used to have people, unfortunately, trying to listen to my conversations regularly. And what would happen with DEF, the phone call will be disconnected. As soon as somebody makes an attempt to breach your privacy on your phone, the call is disconnected. And then you just call back and start again. And that's how you know that somebody is trying to mess with you.
Now, I don't know if you know the answer to this question because I always ask the tough questions. There are devices that you can buy, I believe, legally, that, for example, you could put, like, if you're married, I believe. If you're not married, you couldn't do this. If you're married, you could, and you own the account that the phones are on. You can actually buy something that you could put into your spouse's or your kids' phones that picks up, like, where they're traveling and their calls and things like that. Do you know if DEF would stop that if it was actually set up that way?
I don't know that right off the top of my head. It's something I can check into, though.
Yeah.
As I understand it, this is not about protecting the device. It's about protecting your privacy. Okay? It's about the transmission of the actual data information. Anything else that you do to your phone, that's kind of between you and whoever's involved. That's not what DEF is about.
Right, and I'm looking here on another site, it's called How to Hack Nearly Any Wireless Device. Now, first off, it's amazing that you can find an article that says How to Hack Nearly Any Wireless Device. But one of the things it says is that with a device that transmits as well as receives signals, which is a phone, an attacker can replay the unlocking signal and disable the alarm when the owner's away. So it talks in this article about all the different ways that these people actually hack into different devices to get their information. So on the phone, if you want your calls to be private, then you have to use this type of encryption, basically. It sounds pretty inexpensive compared to, years ago, like I said, when you had to actually have a special device connected to your phone, and then all the other parties. I think that's what they did in the government. They had special devices connected to all their phones so that they were encrypted and they couldn't, no one else could break in. But like Storm said, it makes you wonder, what about the government? Well, let's do this, guys. We got about 15 minutes left. Let's go to a quick commercial break, and we'll come back and finish up. Stay with us.
Have your house payments skyrocketed under an adjustable rate mortgage? Have you been laid off or had your hours cut? Are balloon payments coming due? You need help from mortgage fraud examiners. To stop the housing crisis, Congress and the White House are pinning their hopes on homeowners renegotiating their mortgages. The trouble is, the banks are saying no 80% of the time. Mortgage fraud examiners can help you get the leverage you need to turn things around. They estimate that up to 85% of all mortgages are legally deficient. Mortgage fraud examiners can perform a mortgage transaction analysis and an appraisal to find legal deficits in your mortgage. It's like CSI for your home loan. Banks and lenders suddenly start cooperating when faced with a lawsuit for violating lending laws or appraisal fraud. Find out how mortgage fraud examiners can help you. Visit Mortgage Fraud Examiners. Call 844-920-7200. That's 844-920-7200.
And welcome back on AM FM 24/7. Storm, are you there?
I'm here, my kid.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, we've got John Edmonds with us, and John, we're talking about this death protection thing, and I'd like to read just a little bit off the site because it's I like the scientific stuff. And it says death was developed over a period by 3 leading computer scientists with backgrounds in physics, optoelectrics, encryption, compression, and cryptography. That's a lot of words. The system is a complete hardware and software system that allows various electronic devices to be protected and have all transmissions received or transmitted cloaked and the contents undetectable. If you can envision a transmission of information, everything is compromised of ones and zeros. Death conceals information within information. It also works at quantum speed levels, which makes information virtually impossible to capture. Even if someone was able to capture it, it would be virtually impossible to decipher. Data and voice transmissions are totally obfuscated, and since it uses highly innovative proprietary technologies, hackers are not able to penetrate nor crack the deaf system. So none of us are really, the 3 of us, we're not really like technical people, but I understand what they're saying is they have, it sounds like they have scientists who have put together a system that can't be beat. Now, hopefully they will remain forward-thinking because somehow someone always figures out how to beat the system. So is Deaf looking, forward in time to staying ahead of the game, with the phones, and then possibly if that works, then they would use it for other types of devices?
Yes, I mean we're already doing the testing right now. This is what I'm repeating what I've been told, and that is that all of these, your computers, your laptops, your desktop, your tablets, all of these are going to be able to be included in packages. We're going to be offering different 3 device packages, 5 device packages, family packages, all that kind of stuff. And so you'll literally be able to use the DEF system across all those platforms.
What would be interesting is if they were able to develop it for your regular desktop or laptop computer, so that when somebody, like I was telling Storm in the earlier story before we started with you, that I know got an email from Amazon. It looked like it was from Amazon, and it basically said, if someone has placed an order in your name, if you did not place an order, click on this attachment. So she did, and of course that opened up a can of worms. So what I'm wondering is down the road, if they're able to make something like that for, the desktop or laptop computers, that even if the person clicked on the attachment, nothing would be able to transmit in any direction whatsoever. I mean, that would stop basically all kinds of fraud.
Yes, it would. I wish I could tell you that was something that I know they're looking at, but I just don't know that information.
Well, that's right. You could tell them that we said that you should look into it, because if you could stop things like stop fraud on computers as well as on phones, and I mean, people are going to be interested in this. I know the government probably already is using it, I would assume, but people that are in high profile people, politicians or celebrities. Because you hear those stories how someone got the phone call and, put it up and for the whole public to listen to. So
right.
People would be, afraid, high-profile people would be afraid, or government people would be afraid, and this would stop that.
Well, I can tell you, Laurie, that for the 2016 campaign, Donald Trump had 96 cell phones that were hooked up to death, and it performed flawlessly.
That's awesome. Storm, questions?
No. I'm just listening. It it sounds like a good product. And again, it appears it's a privacy issue. Is that it's for someone who, for whatever reason, doesn't want their phone calls to be listened to, or if they're using their phone as a computer and they have proprietary information that they share over the phone, that somebody's not hacking that and listening to. I'll give you a prime example. I had somebody the other day called me, and he said, could you do me a favor? He said, instead of sending me a check, he says, could you just deposit some money in my bank account? And I asked him what bank he had, and he told me. I said, yeah, I can do that. And I said, but I'm going to need your account number. So he gave me his account number over the phone. Now, if somebody was listening in, he's in a lot of trouble, because, he started rattling it off when I stopped him and said, well, wait a minute, hold up, just, text it to me. And then I thought about it afterwards and said, well, heck, if somebody can hack these phones, they might even be able to intercept that text. So I can see it has great usefulness as far as those examples would say.
Right, but I think the other part.
Well,
of it
think
too,
about also, like medical information. How many of us, make medical appointments over the phone? That's a common way to do it. And, or transmitting information for medical records. Well, most people aren't going to be real interested in sharing their intimate medical records with somebody other than, their care provider. This is another way to protect that.
Right. It brings me back many years. It makes me think of, when Princess Diana and Prince Charles split up, and they were each having an affair, and somehow someone got hold of each of their recordings, and they blasted it. The most personal information, they blasted it without their consent for all the world to hear. And
exactly.
that to me, that's scary to me, because I'm just a regular person, and phone calls that I have that are private, I want to remain private. If I wanted them public, I would put them on social media. But I think part of the problem, too, is that people they're not aware. That's why we do the show, John, is to make people aware of what could potentially happen to them, how they can prevent it, and what they can do if it's already happened. And unfortunately, this is a case where it can be prevented by having this product, but if it's already happened, then it's too late. And a lot of people learn too late. So we try to teach people that you need to know certain things before you proceed. So in this case, having this death protection, them and the person that they're speaking to, which I think is great, and hopefully they'll continue to expand their services. When it comes to the other devices right now, though, you're not really protected, and if you don't look at emails and where they come from, or, Storm knows a couple of weeks ago, I almost got scammed through PayPal, and I am pretty good at not not getting scammed online, but the criminals have become so smart, and their tactics, they change over time. Like they all might try the same tactic initially, and then they go, well, that's not working, so let's go to plan B. And when plan B isn't working, let's go to plan C. And they just go right down till they get to Z and they start over again. And it especially affects elderly people. I think that's really important to note. But I think the DEF program works really well. So maybe tell us again, what the website is and, how they can get this protection.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Go to www.deaf.protection.com and then use the code STARDUST.
Okay, very good. And Storm, any last thoughts?
No, it was very interesting. I'm glad to know there's a product like that out there. It's something that's sorely needed, for sure. So we thank you, John, for coming on and educating us on your product. And, I'm more than happy to help spread the word about it. I think it's something that, every patriot should probably take advantage of and use.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you having me on. And as I said before, we're looking at updating and trying to expand services and products here, like in the next 60 to 90 days. So I think there's a very good chance that we'll be looking at being able to protect all the other devices, sometime in 2019.
Boy, that'd be great.
And it is, and your prices are actually really good. So we'll let people go to your website to see how it works. So thanks again for being on the show. Storm, thanks again for co-hosting. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us today on Fraudsters Radio. You can join us again next Monday from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time live. Remember, we do want to hear your stories, and you can contact us through the Fraudsters Radio Facebook page.
Bye, guys, and Happy New Year to all.
Yes, Happy New Year.
Consumers, do you have bad credit? Can't purchase a house or car? Paying too much in interest on your credit cards and loans? Scammed by credit repair companies? There is hope. You can get back on track and do it the right way. Call Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Or go to crediteducationconsultants.com now and get the help you need. Don't delay. Call today. Mortgage reps and realtor inquiries are also welcomed.
Have you received a notice of foreclosure on your property? Do you suspect that you're involved in an unfair or fraudulent loan agreement? Are you looking for a way to save your home? Would you like to cut through all the misinformation and find out what really works? Would you like to learn strategies that the so-called gurus aren't aware of? If you answered yes to any of those questions, a professional team at Mortgage Fraud Examiners can assist you and your attorney with all of these things and more. Contract breaches, errors, statutory regulatory violations, fraudulent appraisals, and other fraudulent conduct cause most mortgages to be legally problematic. In fact, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation found that nearly 2,000 financial institutions they assessed received citations for significant compliance violations. They also examined appraisals and found out that of the 259 appraisals reviewed for accuracy, only 7 fully complied with professional standards. Attorneys who have followed our methodologies have received multi-million-dollar rewards and free title to the homeowner's property. There is a very high likelihood your mortgage contains an extensive error. At Mortgage Fraud Examiners, we know just how costly a missed opportunity can be. For almost 40 years, we have consulted, retained, and referred to by attorneys, lawyers, trial practitioners throughout the nation. Put another way, we are the trusted source for litigation support. A foreclosure is basically an allegation the homeowner breached the contract by failing to make timely payments. The contract is clear. The borrower promised they would make timely payments, and if they didn't, the lender could take the property. The only way to overcome the homeowner's breach is to show the lender breached first. Identify errors that would void the contract. Identify regulatory violations. Identify appraisal fraud and other fraudulent conduct. And the only way to find these wrongs is to thoroughly examine the whole mortgage transaction. This meticulous examination of your mortgage transaction and appraisal can identify legal defects that would make your mortgage unenforceable and entitle you to compensation or even free title to your property. Call us at 844-920-7200. That's 844-920-7200. 844-920-7200.